Battle for the Arts in Conversation on board of the Booker, prizes everywhere. My name is David Bowden, and aside from being your chair, I am also the Battle Satellite Coordinator at the Institute of Ideas and TV columnist at Spiked Online. Since this is a lunchtime session and we're competing with numerous other sessions and the demands for food, I'm going to try and keep my introduction relatively brief so that we can get on to the more filling substance of the rest of the discussion. Just to be clear that from the outset of this discussion is really trying to explore the seeming proliferation of literary prizes and policies that seem to dog them. In particular, we're trying to get under the skin of a literary culture which can often greet the Booker Prize with eye-rolling. See writers such as Alice Oswald and Joan Brady lauded for critiquing the corporate sponsors of their prize. And yet, when Orange withdraws from sponsoring the Orange Prize, it is viewed as a sad event for literature itself, although it still continues as the Women's Prize for fiction. So on the one hand, we seem to be very nervous about prizes. We kind of seem to view them very cynically. On the other hand, we recognise there must be some kind of inherent value kind of within them, which is beyond merely the commercial and marketing. We're not going to try and particularly dissect the ins and outs of the Booker Prize, although I mean it would be silly not to refer to it. But if you feel very ardently that Cell should have won or Small should have won or whatever, then that's a discussion that can take place elsewhere. But it is very much the backdrop to the discussion, and there's no point to pretend as if the Booker does not dominate other sorts of prizes. I can't really do justice to our speakers because if I gave them a full rundown of their various achievements, it would probably take all of the remainder of the time to go through. So I'm going to very briefly introduce them. You can check the website for more information and for an extended bio. First and foremost, we have to my far right, we have Damian Barr, who is a salonierre and creator and host of the fantastic Shoreditch House Literary Salon, among numerous other projects. He's probably the only man who has more salons on the go than the Institute of Ideas. And he is author of the forthcoming memoir, Maggie and Me, published soon by Bloomsbury. Then we have to my far left, Miguel Fernandes Ceia, who is a writer, translator and critic, who holds MAs from both the universities of Lisbon and London. And is also my co-producer on the session, and is the one who convinced me that this was a timely and interesting topic to try and take on and run that approach group. So to my immediate left, I have Russell and Denis Johnson, who is director of the creative writing programme at Birkbeck here in London. He's been both a prize judge for the Man Booker in 2002, and also the recipient of China's Prize for his novel 10 Seconds from the Sun. He's also the author of numerous other novels and essays and writes quite extensively around literary culture. And then as by no means least, we have Alexandra Pringle, who is group editor-in-chief of Bloomsbury works. My bio basically runs like a potted history of the most interesting areas of language publishing over the last 30 odd years. Starting up initially at Bravo Modern Classics, but she is also in her time as a literary agent and literary manager for the likes of Margaret Atwood, Richard Ford, Patti Smith, John Tart, and many, many more. So a good old-fashioned bookseller with an angle on his way, but also somebody who is actively involved in literary culture as well as that. So we're delighted to have a kind of interesting panel. So I'm going to try and run this very much as an conversation. There won't be extensive speeches to have. I'm going to try and put a sort of number of questions to the panel. They can feel free to dive in to talk very much amongst yourselves. Don't wait for a comment from me. If you rather than try to speak over somebody, if you want to get my attention, then I can try and referee. I normally run these sort of panels with a bit more alcohol on the table later in the evening, but people indicated that even in literary circles in the present day, that's not quite the done thing. So we're going to be fueled by watered ideas for the rest of the day. But I think I'm going to, as a kind of opener to the panel, I'm just going to sort of start where we kind of fueled the idea for this, was actually the decision of the Pulitzer Prize to award the fiction award this year, which kind of came, to a lot of people actually as a bit of a sort of shock, because although we look to prizes as a form of critical judgment, we generally expect there to be a winner. We expect somebody to get a prize every year, and in this instance, it didn't. It wasn't that they felt that it was so terrible that literature may as well just pack up and go home, but the judging kind of felt they couldn't choose between who was the best fiction prize. So, I mean, is that okay? Do the literary prizes play a healthier role as tooling and a criticism? Do they have anything to do with a kind of critical culture, or are they more about selling books, trying to build reputations and so on? And the like. Russell?
Who's going to go first? Literary prizes. Yeah, they're good, basically, but at the same time, they're limited. It's a lottery. Very often, with, say, a book of shortlist, the book that wins is often the judge's third or second choice. In other words, they can't agree on something, and so in the end, it gets awarded to a slight compromise. The shortlist is the best thing. Actually, if you look at the shortlist for a prize, that is a better indication of what's good out there. And the Booker shortlist this year was quite striking for rewarding 3 very small publishers and 3 mainstream publishers. That, I thought, was a political statement from fairly wise judges. Then, of course, they gave the prize to Hilary Mantel, and even though I think she's a very fine recipient of the prize, it was a bit like giving a banker a bonus, because she won it before. I mean, my point I want to really make now, because it's the thing that I came here to say, and I think that my feeling is that the antecedent of the novel is the Greek drama, in which the action takes place off stage, and there's very little left of that in the modern novel. It has become, there's a certain orthodoxy, and the orthodoxy is narrative. The modern novel seems to be fixated with pumping narrative. And the problem with that, I think, is it's something that every publisher seems to require from authors. So plot, narrative, these things have never been particularly memorable in the novels of Dickens, or Thomas Mann, or H. Lawrence, or Virginia Woolf, writers who have survived in the culture. So I don't know whether that narrative thing is going to become more of a kind of form of social control, really, and that's why I fear that narrative is like the only.
There was something striking about what she said that for me kind of pinpoints it. I'm going to pick up on your words, which is the shortlist was amazing because it rewarded publishers. No, wrong. It should reward writers, not publishers. That's the problem for me with awards. We're thinking about publishers and how probably more powerful publishers get more awards than small publishers. It's great that they get to be on the shortlist because they get probably 1 or 2 years of selling all those books. But we're talking about literature and the people who are writing it, not necessarily the people who are publishing it. Because I suppose there are awards for publishers. And my point here is that awards should be for writing.
Well, Formula 1 car construction. Yeah.
Well, no, I was just thinking that you would have one without the other, and I think that to a certain extent, writers choose their publishers. If they're fortunate, I think you think about the values of the publisher, and you think about. I'm very aware that I'm sitting here next to the woman who's publishing my first which is slightly awkward. But I think that there wouldn't be publishers without writers and vice versa. And I think it's a kind of ecosystem, and prizes are part of that to a greater or lesser degree. I think that this year the book was notable because there were smaller publishers, and that was exciting. And Salt, for example, has talked about how that's benefited them and the kind of uptake that they've had. But it's not just in terms of sales; it's also in terms of recognition from writers and also agents who mediate that process. So I take it back just one stage to say that I think that having been nominated for the prizes and shortlisted for the prizes in the past, that it's about being it's about recognition first of all from your employer or your publisher, and then from your peers. And it's not just about winning or losing; it's about that whole kind of process. And I think that's really valuable. The conversations that take place about that are really good.
What I think was interesting about the book this year was that was that they were the small publishers, but the point about that is that small publishers have fewer books. They're able to put forward more experimental books towards for prizes, because I think what most people don't know is that with a book prize, each publisher is only allowed to submit 2 books. So if you're publishing, say, 70 new novels in a year, and you have a very mature list, which the literary publishers have, like Jonathan Cape or Chattel or Faber or Bloomsbury, you have maybe 15 books that are very obvious Booker submissions. And so it's agony. The process of working out who you're going to put in is very painful and has to be very secret. And of course, if you have a tiny publishing company and you publish 6 books in a year, then you could put forward something that another publisher would not be able to submit. And that's, nobody's looked at that and talked about that. And the Orange Prize, you're allowed to put in 3 books, and previously shortlisted books. But you know, even with the Booker, it used to be up until 2 years ago, shortlisted books that have been shortlisted within 10 years. And we had at Bloomsbury a very embarrassing thing that happened, which is that often you have to do a political game, which is you put in your call-ins for the most famous writers, so that to give the newer ones a bit of a chance, hoping that they will get called in. And of course, that's a terrible gamble. And 3 years ago, it was Howard Jacobson. He was a call-in because he was the most famous writer that we had that year, and he did get called in, and he won, and it came out in the press that he'd been called in. One of the judges wrote a piece about that, which I thought was absolutely appalling. And we created a huge fuss with the Booker administration, and they were highly embarrassed by it. And they then changed the rules that any previously shortlisted writer could be put in, so through the whole history of the Booker Prize. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix, because I think people don't understand the difficulties that publishers have in working out who to put forward for the prizes. And the prizes are very, very important, because they can change everything.
Yeah, because I want to pick up on that, because I was kind of interested that, you know, this year the kind of book went for the smallest presses. And I felt about the kind of syndrome. I mean, I'm a great fan of small publishing. And often, you know, I become a little bit cynical towards them, sort of book, but I was like, they're kind of rooted on small publishing, because I knew how much difference it would make to, you know, their financial model. I haven't read the book, still haven't read the book. I don't know whether it deserves to win, but I was when I realised that I fallen into that trap. Last year, this book tried to sort of notoriously prioritise readability over sort of writing, which was also a big question.
But then this year's book was very much working in opposition to last year. I think if last year hadn't had all the fuss around Stella Remington and, you know, we want readable books, then I don't think they would have been quite as high-minded as they were this year. It was a very high-minded year, I think, in response to last year.
No, that's definitely with that particular prize. I mean, I had one of the American prizes, and they are very specific that you have to say man booker or not booker. And one of the judges at my literary salon recently, and I was looking at the criteria for the prize, and it's something that basically to do with excellence each year. Everybody's idea of excellence varies and is entirely subjective. And so it seems to me quite difficult to look at the continuum of Booker Prize winners and see any sense of, well, this is what a Booker Prize winner would be, which I think must make it hard for publishers to think about what they want to submit. But it's also kind of hard, you know, for me, I look back and maybe that's a good thing that each year I'm surprised or I'm forced to think about it anew, but I just wonder if it makes it hard for the judges to be consistent. Whereas with the Orange, I always feel there's a sense of, you know, there's a sense of continuity.
There's a great consistency in the Orange. And actually, what the Orange does is one of the things that Russell is so upset about, is it is very much about sustaining narrative and strong characters and books that are not easy to read, but that take you into a world, and that also you can discuss. You know, you can discuss the themes.
Well, Marilyn Robinson was a clear winner of the Orange, and you know, she's not readable, but she's a kind of genius. So
yeah,
that was a good, you know, good call. I'm thinking about coming back to this thing about publishers and prizes. I mean, Deborah Levy's novel, published by Hand of the Stories, a subscription-only publisher, was turned down by everyone, including Faber, which now published a paperback for
well, I can tell you the exact background to that.
All I would say is I'm not actually blaming publishers here. I just think it's a difficult market. It's low towards the retailer. I think, you know, publishers are struggling in a really difficult moment. So that the cultural powers passed to ASDA, I think, and Tesco, and they in turn influence what publishers can do. So it's not this sort of strange dance that's going on. I suppose my opening statement about the book rewarding small presses is important because small presses and some writers start off as subcultural talents, and then they become the culture. If you look at France before the Second World War, the writers that we know as household names were minor figures: Sartre, Cocteau, Genet, Gide. They were the subculture, and then they became the culture. Fayot was a boutique publisher once, now it's a mainstream independent publisher. Salt Publishing may one day become the favour of the future. So, watch that space. And I think it's a good thing that the Booker judges look for text. Whoever was publishing it thought this is the best thing we've read this year.
But there is a question about a kind of interesting because of the supermarket sort of example. It's a blunt pipe word for the sort of book as a kind of mass sort of product. Obviously, publishers start to try and sort of partly kind of really emphasise themselves on their expertise. That a publisher, a bookseller is not just an asset or a pile of hires slightly cheaper or kind of any other supermarket. But at the same time, it's almost, whereas kind of the authority of the kind of cultural critic kind of because it seems striking to me that we can name a large number of literary prizes, but there are probably very few famous literary critics in any way, even though a prize ultimately does resonate. Obviously there's not that much coherence because they change their sort of judges every year, so we kind of get this strange cultural authority bestowed on prizes, even though there's no coherence.
Well, I think there is some coherence. The Orange Prize, I would say again, is a prize that does have coherence year to year. And I will always get the Orange Prize shortlist. I will always look at those books. In fact, probably more than any other prize, that's the prize that interests me most. I do feel that it's coherent year to year, but I do agree also that the Booker is not. And there's a certain amount of eye rolling. I will also say here, I lost 20 quid betting that Will Self would win on the book, so I'm quite better about it. But I think that it's difficult for some prizes. When the Pulitzer Prize decided, that they wouldn't make an award, I thought, pity so much. It's like cowards. They just don't want to. They just don't want to make a call. And they should, because actually part of the process of being judgmental is people disagreeing with you. You shouldn't be afraid to be disagreed with. And I think that's a really important part of giving prizes, is that some people don't get a prize. Not everybody deserves a prize, in the same way that not everybody deserves to be published, and not everyone who gets published deserves to be read.
But I guess the thing about literary prizes is it precludes a sort of certain judgment in that way. So you have to decide what the best number of this year or whatever. So in a sense, I kind of feel divided about not making that simple. I can't work out whether it's a form of being a pussy, kind of not making it, whether it's a form of non-judgmentalism, whether it's a form of ultimate judgmentalism, and actually saying we're not going to play this game.
We're going to annoy every publisher in town. You're at the end of the game. I think if you're sitting down, if you're invited to be a judge for something, you need to be a judge. You can't not be a judge. I think that's ridiculous, and I was really irritated by that decision. And it's like it's like people who don't exercise their vote, for whatever reason. I just think you should vote, take part in the system. But particularly for those judges, it really did irritate me. And particularly, I think it's unfair for people who shortlisted for the prize as well. I think it was disrespectful.
But again, who are those judges? I think that one of the things that's not best kept secrets, I think it's becoming more public, is who are the judges? What are their credentials? Because I suppose that this year the Booker's judges were, I could go there, I could read Hilary Mantel based on their judges, but on last year's, and I'm sort of trying to go over the fact that Stella Remington said the readability. I'm trying to say, what is her credential as a literary critic?
It's not just about.
Why is she judging a major literary prize?
I don't think literary prizes have to be judged by literary critics. They're judged by intelligent readers, and Stella Remington is a highly intelligent woman. And what was interesting, I thought, this year was that amongst the judging panel were two historians. So it's no great surprise that Hilary Mantel won. You could say we shouldn't have two historians on the panel. And it's obviously they're a historical novel. I think you can quarrel about every judging panel. but I think why I think the origin is consistent. I think it's steered by the administrators
And the
in
values.
a clearer way. The values are put forward more. I think perhaps the steerage of the book is not done with such a firm hand.
And the book, I mean, I would like to see 4 dictators being chosen for the book of Anne. You smell the correlate, you know, the end of the session. But the book is only 1 prize, but it is becoming the prize to win. Always, all the dream of winning it because it changes your life. And the moment you, in the shortlist meeting, decide upon a winner, you know you just handed that right over £1 million in sales. So, you know, and I was a book at panel. A book at judge when we gave the prize to Life of Pi. That book has now become, you know, very, very famous, and he's a very wealthy man. But prior to that moment, it was published by then a relatively small press, and it changes things. But the book, and the problem with the book is it's dominated the prize scene. You know, there have been in the past the small prizes don't necessarily have the same public impact, but they have an impact in the trade. And I think if you have won a small literary prize or the first book, then the publishers and the people in the book trade will know this, and it does help the course of the second novel, the third novel, whatever it might be. But it still comes down to this thing about how we, as readers, have access to good literature. There used to be a time, probably ending in the 1970s, when if your book got reviewed, it would sell. Simple as that. The newspapers, literary editors had the influence. So they were the arbiters of taste. And if they decided to review something and review well, it's sold. That is now no longer the case. So how do we find our way to really good text? I do it through publishers. New York Review Books, for instance. You know, if you want to find good books, go there. Bloomsbury, Faber are always good publishers. So I personally look at the spine and think, okay, we can't do that bad. But how do you find your way to really good, interesting work has become more and more complicated?
It's very difficult for publishers to find their way to readers now. And you're absolutely right that reviews were very, very influential, and they're not anymore. They're almost no relationship to the sales of the book. Although sometimes they're part of what happens. You can get a great onslaught of incredible reviews. We published Kate Summerscut's Suspicions of Mr. Witcher. It began with amazing reviews, but it then has to take all sorts of other things along with it. And what publishers are having to concentrate on now is how to get direct to the reader. So we're using social media in a way that we never have imagined could have happened, Facebook and in particular Twitter. And all other sorts of social media have to be your way. If advertising doesn't work, you can spend a fortune putting posters up on the underground. It doesn't mean the books are going to sell at all. And what is it? It's, you know, book groups are very influential. It's people talking to each other. It's word of mouth. And how do you kick that off? This is what we're always trying to find. There's no direct way of getting a book out there. And there is a way, which I think is marvellous, that the public will make their own decision. You can't make them take a book. And even within prizes, the Booker Prize is an important prize, but there's some books that will sell in huge quantities if they win the Booker or on the shortlist, and others far fewer. And it's the same with the Orange. You know, I had personally 3 books on the Orange shortlist, so there was half the shortlist this year, and one of them was the winner. So obviously the winner was going to do very well. But the other two, one has sold 20,000 copies and the other sold 60,000 copies. That's really says something. It's very interesting.
But I mean, in terms of that kind of, I mean, it's kind of just interesting in the Orange Prize because in a way it's, because obviously kind of prizes which kind of are there to sort of champion some new writers, they kind of sort of representative writer sort of question. Kind of sort of interesting because it's trying to expose writers that are often overlooked by the mainstream in a sort of certain way. But there is that endless debate about the role of the kind of the women's prize in fiction now, whether it's necessary or divisive. It's not. I'm alluding to that.
There are prizes for people who first novels over the age of 40 in fiction. There's one first novel that the author has to be over the age of 60, the Sagittarius Prize. One of mine has got that. That's a high moment in my life. There are prizes for people Wales, there prizes from people from Scotland.
Yeah, but this is, I introduced this topic here because I like the Warwick Prize, and I think it's true that it's one, probably, is actually one I pay attention to in a way that I don't do with the book, but I find it actually very interesting. What I'm also observing is that when you have the proliferation of prizes in that kind of climate, we kind of look to it in the form of kind of criticism and judgment. Like, how can we make a
problem? It's the ghettoisation. So I've just finished a book that's got lots of gay content in it, and I would be thrilled if it was nominated for the Blythe Prize or the Reincarnation or something like that. But I wouldn't want to think that I was only speaking to a particular constituency of readers. I would want to think that the book that I've written has a wider relevance. And I think that there can be a problem with some of these things where you're nominated for a small, it's a funneling down rather than an opening up. So you have the payoff of, yes, you might reach a particular audience, but you maybe want to have a wider resonance in that. Maybe that's just to do with the writing and finding the readers. I don't know, but I have a lot of concern about that.
Because I mean, it's a question of whether the prize is a good, I mean, just a good substitute for critical culture in a way that there's a role within the kind of ecosystem.
I don't think that's a really relevant question for this decision, because I think that none of us sitting here are going to say we don't think we should have literary critics, nor should we have literary prizes. I don't think one is a substitute for the other. I think if you think that, then you're probably not going to make the best choices when you get to the bookshop or when you get home. What I will do is pick up on what Alexandra made about big book sales with prizes. Lots of books will, if they win a prize, they might sell lots. There are some books that sell lots and then just don't get read. There is that. There are years where we get like 3 or 4 copies of the same book for Christmas, and we're like, oh my God, I'm still not going to read it. And I don't care if one of them could. It's like or whatever. So
it's interesting to see what books survive 10 years after.
Yeah.
Because the other thing about prize, I think Miguel's point about who is making these judgments. In the past, the canons were created by academics, I suppose, and there's a limitation to that as well. But nonetheless, I think people who read text very closely may be looking to see if the book is going to survive in the culture for 100 years. And all great books, at the time of their arrival, die. Rainbow Lawrence, Moby Dick. 50 years after Moby Dick was published, it has a second life. Now it's in the culture, but at the time it was just rejected. So if someone was on a Booker Prize or Pulitzer Prize panel when Moby Dick was published in the mid-19th century, they might have thought this book is not readable. So Stella Bennington would have thought that. But at the same time, somebody, Harold Bloom or someone might have said that it's going to last. Now that's the biggest judgment you can ever make, and that takes real talent.
That's what I think. Both awards and academics are important because they play different roles, and they're obviously there's tensions and there's room for everyone. Whereas an academic would premiere Moby Dick, someone on a Booker or Orange Prize panel would award something else. But if that being said, I come from a slightly more academic background, so I am more reluctant towards awards, but I still do acknowledge that they often recognize a writer's merits. I just try and look at them very suspiciously.
I was just very simple point. I'm not sure that longevity or durability is a guarantee of quality. I think that we've all had to encounter those sort of great texts, and you sometimes come away from them and you just think, well, why is it still there? And I sometimes feel there's a sense of self-perpetuating culture around certain books where we feel we have to go back and look at them just because our lecturers, our parents, or whoever did. But I do think the point you make is very interesting. A lot of those great books did die at the time. Tolstoy didn't get a good Pulitzer. Nabokov and Chekhov, very well, all these people I met. Margaret Mitchell did win, however, for Golden Win. So, but readability,
there's a woman who survived. But your point is that yes, some books survive in the culture. You think, why?
Yeah.
Really. So yes.
Okay. When I throw it open to the audience, see if they have thoughts, comments they would like to offer. See what our public has to say. Has anyone got? Okay, yeah. Well, I'll just take this a group of questions. So I'll take that guy first, and try to get mine for the whole room. But yeah,
think actually we've almost got the opposite problem, is that we've got enough prizes and judging going on. The Guardian today, the Guide has got a write your book in 30 days, which I think has given us all a bit of a cold sweat first thing in the morning.
True.
You know, I mean, it's scary stuff. I mean, there's a bit of statistics done in the US which talk about us reaching author-geddon, where actually there will be more writers of books than readers of books. And actually, you know, if you look at the curve, it's true. If you go back 100 years, we're talking about only handfuls of titles published. To one where we have over 150,000 new titles this year. The UK publishes more books than any other country, but head of population in the whole world. Now, how you've also, this is a changing environment where everyone has access to more books than ever before. So the internet has opened it up. You don't have just access to your local library and the recommendations of your friends and things that were on your bookcases. It's opened up a vast long tail of niches of lots of different areas where lots of actual judgments would be very helpful. So without, you know, and absolutely acknowledging the fact you don't want to also be pigeonholed into only ever talking to that tiny little part of the audience, you do want to find something that's bigger, like a book that can reach broader, can make sales, can actually cover shared cultural experience. What you don't want to have on the other end is everyone having to read self-published stuff, which is poorly edited and actually has no real value and devalues the book as a whole.
Okay, great point. And sort of go to
yeah, I'm mostly talking about large fiction prizes. Ricky mentioned smaller prizes. Two things. One, what do you think about pay-to-play prizes, particularly when they have very large fees, which is not great for struggling writers. Number two, it was a point that I think Caroline Duffy made, that when she started winning the Literary Prize in the 1980s, they were of an amount that she could live on for quite some time. So the idea was that you would win a prize, live on it, write the next book. It seems to me that most of the big prizes, particularly in poetry, I'm sure it's the same as some of the fiction ones, the prizes have not gone up with inflation. So if you win it, you just win prestige. You don't win enough to, you know, to suffer the next book. So I was wondering about what you think about those two things.
So essentially, I mean, Starship has used the Nobel Peace Prize to become an institution. Because it just stuck out for a few more years even with the Peace Prize.
What's the most valuable? Is it the impact?
The impact is 100,000 euros, but it doesn't sell books. It's really interesting. Bloomsbury authors have won it twice, 2 years running, which is amazing. And the first year it was Colin McCann, because the prize is given in Dublin, did affect his sales, but only in Ireland, and there was significant change. This year it was John McGregor, made absolutely no dent on his sales whatsoever. But he got 100,000 euros tax-free.
But then anyway, I mean, that's interesting. It's the sort of shift between what used to be a kind of more old-fashioned, you know, an award, I mean, actually in terms of a sort of research kind of stuff. Like, you have some things like the Warwick Prize for writing, which kind of emerged to trend. Because it was, they now tend to...
Somerset Maugham has always been to travel to give writers money.
But it seems like the prize is partly sort of extended as a way of extending grants.
I mean, actually, there's only about 2 or 3 prizes that will give you money to the Confederate problem as a country. Most of it's £2,000, £5,000. The first prize I ever won was the David Foster Prize. I think it's £1,000. The second, won an award in China recently, for which I got a bunch of flowers in a vase. Admittedly in Beijing, but nonetheless, you know, nothing to live on. But it's prestige. It's more. But there are about 3 or 4 prizes that really are well paid.
There's the Dylan Thomas Prize.
Well, that's
£30,000.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I mean, I spend a lot of time, assessing people who are sent to me from my salon and picking people, and it's a great position to be in. Prizes are interesting to me, shortlisters are interesting to me because it's a shorthand. I would never choose somebody because they were tempted to win or because they had one. Very often I would choose the runner-up or one of the losers, in fact, because I like the book more. I know to do that, but I didn't even know about the Dylan Thomas Prize until recently. And we've got one of the judges come to talk about it in the dynamics and just thought, you know, of course there's Dylan Thomas Prize.
And the we have a short story writer on there, so that's incredible to have the potential. This is a young Canadian called D.W. Wilson.
Yeah.
And he has the potential for a collection of stories to be
Yeah, it's a great collection.
Is there, I mean, yeah, there's a guy, Rachel. Okay, there's a whole line of people there.
I think the prizes are great, but they really should just be a kind of launching pad for the undiscovered writer or the emerging writer. Particularly with Booker, for example. I think it was fantastic that David Lee was on the shortlist actually, because I didn't know that. It was sort of obscure plays in the middle of the warehouse, documents and freezing cold blankets and other experimental pieces. So it's wonderful to see David Lee on the shortlist and then to see her books in W.H. Smith's and supermarkets and so forth. But to have Hilary Mantel again on the shortlist, it just feels that she has had that visibility, and therefore why should she be on the list again?
Can I just violently disagree?
Okay.
It's not. It's like Usain Bolt wins one gold medal, and what he's not allowed to race again. He's not allowed to win it. I think we should continue to reward excellence. But what I will say to you is that I think there is a problem with people who are trying to not necessarily break through, because there are lots of prizes for first novelists, but people who are maybe on their second book. And last year I was a judge for a series of prizes called Fiction Uncovered, which is a brilliant scheme which was about finding writers who were neglected by other prizes, who were actually brilliant, they had great talent, and they've been, won, the Booker Say in the 80s, one of our people who won the Booker in the 80s. And we picked 6 people, and they were given a promotion award to students. They were all invited and congratulated. It really boosted their sales, and it really helped them at a time when the publishers were very busy, the publicists didn't have time for them, and they were kind of falling through the net of the other prizes. So I agree with you up to a point. I do think we need to think about those other people, but I do think we should continue rewarding excellence. And just because you won once doesn't.
I think the point about the book, and I was worried about the book in recent years, because the book I would have thought should be for the finest, most important novel published that year. That's it. That is what everybody should be striving to achieve in their choice. And I think that is what they were trying to do. And there was a period when I thought too many first novels were getting awarded the Booker Prize. And I think that is actually rather problematic, because it should be a writer at the absolute peak of their powers, at the top of their game. Some people get straight there with their first novel, but not many writers do. And I felt the Booker had sort of disappeared a bit in terms of.
Okay, and maybe then pass it to
I was going to actually come back to something that Alexandra said, because we've been talking very much about this sort of very prestigious literary awards, the Booker and the Orange. And there hasn't been any mention of things like Richard and Judy's TV book club, which I think for publishers certainly can have the equivalent kind of, if not prestige, it can do as much for an author's sales. And I just wonder if something like that, where really, and again, as this gentleman was saying, it becomes an easy shorthand for booksellers to know what to put at the front of their shop. If something's just got that little sticker on, does that kind of thing devalue the literary prizes and the fact that, if all these things just become an equivalent way of flagging up books to readers, is it devaluing the idea of excellence in
can we just wait to lady from the ask questions?
It's slightly related. I was just wondering if are the best books finding their ways to the audience? Are we missing out? Prices aren't directing us to the best books. Sometimes I wonder if they are. What is directing us to the best books? Where does that happen? Does it happen automatically?
That takes us back to what Celyn said, which is which I want to talk about. I think the Richard and Judy has had as profound an effect on what people read that pretty much as the Booker and the Orange, actually, and the sales of the book. It's just extraordinary what will happen if you're on that, particularly when it was, I'm afraid, on television. Once it was no longer on television, the sales immediately went down. But there's still a very, very powerful promotion. But the interesting thing about that is it's just about the book and not the author. So people will buy, say, 150,000 copies of that book that you can sell, and then the next book will go down to selling maybe 15. People don't discover authors, they go for the books. And I think that's a bit depressing.
Yeah, well, I mean, also the 50 Shades very built on the idea. I mean, and again, that's kind of interesting how that was created. It's something, the idea that there's a thing called erotic fiction that nobody had ever heard of or published publishing.
The prize for
This was new, and then it was on, it was on Oprah, and it's this whole new thing. In a way, that was kind of interesting because that was really a media-driven kind of discussion around books, which I thought was kind of interesting as a model.
I don't think it was.
I think
it was a phenomenon. It's a zeitgeist.
Yeah. I heard people talk. I heard people in Holland talking about 50 Shades, reading 50 Shades, and I heard one woman saying to another, in a restaurant, she said it's like crack. It's like crack, and I was like, what are they talking about? And so I was thinking, how do you know that? And it was 50 Shades, and she passed the copy of the books and the so whilst there are all sorts of problems with it, mainly it's shit. It is good in that people are enjoying it, and who knows what kind of, it might be a gateway drug rather than crack. But that is a good thing.
The problem with say 50 Shades of Grey is the same problem with any phenomenon. I think the bookseller understands this, that people come in and buy one book. No, they don't go out with EQ and 50 Shades of Grey. If they're going to go and get 50 Shades of Grey, that's what they're interested in. Sure. So it doesn't sort of pass across to.
But it's not a problem with booksellers, though, isn't it? Shouldn't booksellers be trying to talk to people
Well,
rather
I'm
than
sure some they do.
Yeah.
Because they're in the for good reason. I mean, the other job I do is I teach creative writing, and I'm very aware of this culture of more people writing books and reading, and it's weird. And I stand at the gateway, and anyone comes in and says to me, I want to write a bestseller, show me how to do it. I say, if I knew, I might do it myself. If I didn't know, I couldn't tell you anyway. But more importantly, I just say, you're in the wrong game. This is about learning, learn to read, actually. That's what critical writing teaching is. It's the way of teaching English at the best level. But there are sort of institutions, and we talk about Faber Academy, we talk about Guardian. As you say, the front page of the Guardian today impressed me as well. Write a novel in 30 years. Why would you want to?
Why would you want to read something?
And poor readers, have to read that. So I mean, there's a sort of strange culture going on, which is focusing on the narcissism of writing rather than on the issues.
Yes,
I must say, I've made this point earlier. Well, there's been a great novel that I know, at least one that's been written in 3 weeks, and I'm thinking of I Shall Spit on Your Graves by Boris Vian. And on the point that you can actually write good stuff in less than a month. But coming back to the booksellers, I worked as a bookseller, and I ran the fiction section at Waterston's in Piccadilly, very successfully, I must say. And obviously, it's very hard work, making sure that everything is nice and tidy. It's very hard work to reach to people, because most of the times, other people that you're working with don't share your interest in books and literature, and people are really not interested in your intake. I knew my section very well. I knew what would go with what, and I know how to make good recommends to people that sometimes would come back to me. Yeah. It's not necessarily a problem with the booksellers, it's a problem with people. People want that, and that's it. They're not interested in listening to anything else.
That's the voice of the bookseller review. The
problem is not the books, it's the people.
But I would say it's not that it comes to us.
Because that is the challenge for book prizes, where we try to enhance the kind of accessibility and promote sort of writers in a way. I mean, as you say, it's really straightforward as that. You can celebrate the book because it's a first-time author and everyone's reading that. I'd often read that book and then they don't have any other interest in that type of fiction that's kind of as valuable or kind of anything else like that. They just mention that book. Which seems to be the problem of the Hilary Mantel cases. Surely the question would be whether her book is worth winning the prize or not, because she's crowding out an older or a younger sort of 10-year-old or something more overlooked. I mean, that's
it's not
crowding out
as much as 50 Shades is. This is literally such the opposite. I mean, for example, with our winner of the Orange Prize this year, Madeline Miller's Son of Achilles.
Fantastic.
Such a wonderful book, and that is a book. I mean, we've sold over 100,000 copies of it. I'm not complaining, but I think it would have sold double, treble that if people weren't all buying 50 Shades for their holiday read. Everybody took 50 Shades on holiday, and an awful lot of them would have taken Son of Achilles.
I think that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is, I think, speaking here with my journalists have on is that, you know, there's very limited coverage for books in newspapers and feature space. And if the features end up going, do we not have to write about 50 Shades and somebody wants to write about some of Achilles? That, you know, also, like, the conversation just gets shut down when something like 50 Shades reaches a critical mass. But I just wanted to pick up on your point, Stephanie, about, you know, lists and recommendations. I think that they're actually really valuable if you value the person who's making the recommendation. And, you know, I would love everything that Richard and Julie recommend. They recommend people like Patrick Gale, you know, who I think is fantastic, and George Moyes, who I also think is very good. Books that I might not otherwise have picked up. And, you know, so I think there's a great value, and I think that what we're skirting around here is a kind of division between, you know, books that are supposedly literary, books that are supposedly readable, and, you know, I am not of the opinion that a book must be good just because 750 very clever people have read it in hardback. You know, I don't subscribe to that opinion. I think books can sell lots of copies and also be very good.
Okay, I'm going to try and take a couple more questions. There's a lady there who's a point, and also there's one of the Irish t-shirt in the back.
I wanted to pick up on the previous question that was concerned about how do we know that the best books are getting to us, the readers. And I do read a lot, and I'm also part of the sort of aspirant writers community in Birmingham. And there was a novel that was produced, that was published a couple of years ago by Charlie Hill. It's quite good. It was reviewed by the Spiked Review of books, and it's called The Space Between Things. And he said that the first 300 copies got sold fairly easily, you know, just to friends and relatives, and then suddenly he just hit a brick wall because, and publishers can comment on this, publishers are only really actively promoting the thin top layer of their writers, and increasingly the onus is on the writer himself or herself to do a lot of the promoting. And that concerns me because, well, Charlie's been successful, and it is a good book, but he's largely been successful because he himself is quite an energetic person, but also crucially, it's a book set in the local milieu, so he's able to go to like sort of local cafes and promote it there. And so I would be concerned that the books that are becoming known are increasingly ones where, for one reason or another, they're to do with the author or to do with the subject material itself. It's about how marketable they are by the author rather than their literary merits.
Okay, and there's just back.
Do you think there's a problem with book prizes as viewed by sort of coming from sort of children's and teenage fiction to adults books? Because I mean, my little brother's 14 and he regards any book that's been given a child's book prize as something very preachy that adults and children should read. And I'm worried that he's going to take that same idea of book prizes into adult fiction and think that any sort of adult book with a prize is something preachy and moral that people think you should read rather than something that's good for its own literary value. So do you think there should be something, a literary prize for children's literature that is a lot more in the same sort of ideals as the Orange Prize and Booker Prize, to get younger people into thinking books with prizes are something that I want to seek out and want to read?
Yeah, can I just put that first point about are we accessing, are we getting the right books, the best books, are we getting good access to those people? You know, I think there's a kind of question here about writers as performers, and you know, with live events like this, like book festivals, and salons, all that kind of stuff. You know, writers are getting a role that they were perhaps, you know, that's a much more important role than they've ever had before, which is to go and talk and meet people, and maybe they're not always comfortable with that. And again, in that process of, you know, choosing people for myself, I will always choose what I think is the best book. And if they happen to be quite sociable and good at dealing with performing in front of 300 people, then that's great. But I would never say no to somebody because they were really nervous about it. And when we have the people be really nervous, we have people, you know, be unable to leave the bathroom because they were so stressing about it. But by the same token, I don't think I would never choose somebody just because they were a great performer if they'd written a very good book. You know, I
performances, if you like. So the writer, in our time, became more of a show person. Although Dickens would, big tours in the United States, which never got paid, actually, which is what interesting. So it shouldn't be the crucial thing, but I think actually what I think you're referring to is if an actor, or somebody who's quite famous in one field, decides to capitalise on that fame, they think, let's write a novel. And so they commandeer the novel for in order to enhance their, their public persona. And that's the sort of problem in itself. And the other question about young adult fiction or children's fiction, it's a growing market. And what's interesting about writing for children is that it's written by, it's so heavily mediated by adults. Adults write them, they get published by adults, they get reviewed by adults, and the children read them eventually. So you can't imagine an 8-year-old writing a novel, I suppose. Well, you can, but I don't know how good it is. Sorry?
Daisy Ashford, the young visitors, I think she was 10.
Was she now?
Brilliant.
But that's another sort of field. I mean, why is the young adult novel becoming the novel? Why is that becoming sexy as a form? And I'm curious about it.
I think that was a lot to do with Harry Potter, actually.
Yeah.
When you have these phenomena, then everything changes, everything shifts, and suddenly everyone is chasing after, because so many adults read Harry Potter, and so everyone wants that crossover. And what we haven't really worked out is how to do it. I mean, I happen to think Song of Achilles is the perfect crossover, but we've published it as an adult novel, and I don't think children will find it.
And because Mark Cabot as well was a person.
Curious,
everyone kind of forgets as a kind of young adult novel, really.
Yes.
So kind of doesn't sort of read that.
That's true.
Sometimes those distinctions, because I think that's where there's a problem with the young adult. Because there's some true books that are young adult.
Do you know, when I was a
they're
child,
rather shamelessly trying to talk to children, whereas books can talk to children.
But you never looked for young adult.
You didn't have to.
And when I was a child, when I was 11, I started reading adult books.
Yeah, well, have fun.
That's exactly.
Catching the eye. These are young adult novels, if you like, but they weren't categorised.
Yeah, and that makes me feel slightly uncomfortable, this whole YA industry. But just back on your point, it is agony finding a way for your writers to get out. And yes, increasingly, publishers do have to think about which of the 6 books we've got this year that we can really get behind and really make work. But underneath that, there are a lot of people doing a lot of work, including the editors who are so passionate. Every book is a baby of theirs. And, they do so much. And I think the festivals are a very cheering thing, because it means people actually want to come and meet authors and see them and have proper contact in these days when everybody's on their laptops and their iPads and reading electronically, which I am very much in favour of. But it's great that there's so many festivals. 20 years ago, you didn't have this access to writers, and that has to be a good thing.
Yes, I have been carded. I've been waved the yellow card, which is an indication that you have to start writing. Are there any quick final points that from the floor want to make? Well, I guess that means, I think, just to wrap things up, although I like that one in the Little Festival, you can recommend one book that has not won a prize that you think would be worth the audience going out and checking out for themselves. Just a very brief.
Well, I think a current based on current.
Well, it's something you think that they may not read and they perhaps should read. The reason to recommend a book based on this, maybe not if you don't mind. Any of you have?
I don't read any contemporary novels. But off the top of my head, I would recommend you all go off by Adol Beck, Stifter's book, Rock Crystal, tiny little novella, published by New York.
Just because I've read it recently, because I think it's great, I don't think that it did win a big prize at the time. Was A Boy's Own Story by Edmund White, which is a book that transformed, I think, and saved my life.
Can I have 2, please?
Oh, yeah.
One was chosen for the fiction uncovered, but he hasn't won the big prize, and he should. And it's David Park, who's a Northern Irish writer of such sensibility and beauty. And he's a modest, retired school teacher from a school outside Belfast, and he should win every prize. And the novel is called The Light of Amsterdam. And another is a New Zealand writer called Emily Perkins, and her novel is called The Forests. And it's simply a work of genius.
I would recommend, I don't know the name, but it's Chris Adrian's collection of short stories. I don't know the name of it, but it's amazing. It's probably one of the best things that you can. It's contemporary, which is something that I would not read.
I know that bit too. The cover's blue with golden stars.
Yeah, I think it's an angel or something on that.
It's fantastic.
Great.
Yeah. Do check out, given that you have Alexandra's endorsement of authors going out to meet in this public, highly recommend trying to get yourself onto the increasingly exclusive guest list of the Shoreditch House Literary Salon that Damian runs, and him putting this on project.
It's more fun than anything you can imagine.
And can we thank our panel?